So recently I found out in the community that I'm in, there's a rumor that says I am cruel to women. And so when I first found out about this, and just to give you context, I believe that any gossip, right, any distortion that's out there, there's always a gift or element of, in a way, truth to that gossip. And so when I was told this by a friend, my immediate response was to look inward and say, where am I showing up as being caustic? And sure enough, as I reflected, I realized that for sure in the last 2 years, there's been incidences where I was angry at my sort of partner. And that anger came out with a very caustic tone in the voice. And that absolutely could be interpreted as being cruel by the other person. The reason I'm sharing this is because oftentimes when we hear something that we believe is not true about ourselves, we go right into defense mode. And what I'm suggesting that you do, if you ever hear any sort of gossip about you, is you lean into it. Because ultimately it is showing up in your awareness, right? Because everything is divinely orchestrated as a gift for you. And all things that come into your awareness are mirrors. And from that perspective, it just doesn't make sense to me to defend and say, no, I'm not that. And the only thing really to do is to go in and look at the mirror. You'll always see a gift. Sometimes we forget that life isn't about creating things and building things. Everything that we do, create, and witness is just a mirror. And we get so caught up trying to build the right mirror, the pretty mirror, the beautiful mirror, the big mirror so we can make a big difference. We forget that the actual game is simply looking in the mirror to see thyself. And so just want to make this video and share a personal story and how the application of some of these ancient hermetic principles, right? I'm basically just applying the law of mentalism and correspondence and vibration into this equation, and how the application of these ancient wisdoms allows us to learn and remember and recognize more about ourselves and our divine aspect than any meditation, dark retreat, plant journeys, breath work, any other modality, right? Because those mechanisms are things that you do here and there, whereas 24/7, you are being shown the mirror of who and what you are if you're willing to perceive reality through these incredible ancient principles. I'm sure you heard of the saying, is the cup half full or half empty? And that's contextualized as, if you see it as half full, you're an optimist. If you see it as half empty, you're a pessimist. When I was doing dishes, by the way, if you don't know me, I never use the dishwasher. I always wash dishes by hand because when water is running, these inner awarenesses, right? I used to call them downloads, but now I just call them inner awarenesses. They come through. And by the way, if you want sort of understanding behind the scenes of how these videos get made, these inner awarenesses come, I jot it on my phone, and when I have some moments open, I do what I'm doing right now. And so let's get back to half full, half empty. Many common contexts and many common words were all designed to trap you into the illusion of separation, into the illusion that you cannot wield absolute reality. Right? Another way to say it is to trick you into thinking that you're only the player in this game, to trick you into believing that you're the actual actor in the movie and not also the director. There's so many metaphors. To trick you into thinking that you're free inside a zoo, but you're inside a zoo as an animal. Many metaphors. And so let's just unpack the whole half full, half empty cup metaphor. In reality, you are not just the cup. You're the water. You're the person observing the cup and the water. You're everything. And once we take that in as how reality works, we don't just see a situation and say, let me see the optimism or the benefit or the gift. You start to experience that situation not from always seeing the positive, because if you set the intention to always see the positive, guess what happens? You must be attracting negative things for you to then see the positivity of the negative thing. This is just the law of polarity and rhythm. And so, but if you simply witness all things as is with the knowing that you are creating all things, right? All things come from the mind. That's the definition of the law of mentalism and hermetics. So you have a completely different experience of external reality. You're no longer just swinging a pole of optimist, pessimist. You are able to dissolve that and see it as creator. Right? You get to create reality from a clean slate, not simply problem solve, which anchors your energy in the context to the past, right? An old system. It does not allow you to invent new systems if you're problem solving. You're just improving upon the current situation. And so this video, just like all the videos, is just an awareness of pay attention to the language and the things we're being programmed with and question everything. So I just wrapped up one of my sort of hermetic activations here at the house, and always I'd like to share some wisdom, because these experiences for these people that come and join my game that I like to play in reality always, teaches me infinite things. If you're a student, you're also a teacher, and vice versa. And so what came from this event was, there are two main things. One is, we tend to try to win a game that we did not choose to play. Let's unpack that. We tend to navigate a context within the context to try to come out ahead or win or improve within that context. I'll give you an example. Let's apply this to the world of finances. The very common game worldwide is amass a lot of money. And then that thieving of money comes with this game of abundance and scarcity, comes with the context of more money equals more safety and more significance. If you have enough money, then you're free. However, there's infinite ways to play this game of life. You can imagine you can amass $10 million or $100 million to feel free, or you play a different game, which is, I'm going to spend my life developing the deepest intimacy and trust with 100 people. Now, you can imagine, if you have the deepest intimacy and trust with 100 people, is there anything in any moment in your life where you need something that one of the other 99 would not provide? And so it's a game of intimacy and trust, not a game of extraction and what can I earn? How much can I get? This is how deep can I go and how relaxed can I be with another human? So that's an example of a different game. So we all get to choose the game that we get to play. Don't let society force upon you the game it wants you to play, because the people that are in charge of the systems are essentially profiting from the game that you're playing. And the second part is realizing that there's only ever here and now. There is no there. There is no future. When we start planning for the future, we are taking out of the now. And this is where anxiousness and fear and all the things come. In the now, you're only ever experiencing the present, the gift of now. And so this is a huge thing to realize. I have so many people who are business owners and change makers and impact people that like, I have the thing, or I'm devoted to getting us there. Well, the thing is, there is no there. The moment that you want to get humanity there, you will collapse reality into a version of not there yet. And so the other way to say it is the lie that you must do something to get into heaven. The reality is heaven is here. And so we get to choose an entirely different overall life context. And that switch changes everything in your life. If you are an entrepreneur, an influencer, online marketer, this video is a request that I am making on behalf of loving humans and the survival of our species around the world. And so before I get into the request, I sort of share what has been actually happening in the capitalistic industry. And even conscious capitalism is still capitalism, which is an extractive game. And I get on so many calls and webinars and these free videos. And what I notice is the saturation of Cialdini's work in these videos and the inclusion of neuro-linguistic programming, all designed to psychologically get the customer to buy. And while these tactical things work, they are very manipulative. You're basically using techniques to influence the other person's psychology to get them to buy. Now, many marketers and entrepreneurs will say they justify it as, well, my product or service is doing greater good, so we got to do this in order to get them to buy. This is where my ask is. That's the old way. There absolutely is a new way to invite people into your offering and you without manipulation. I'm sort of slightly frustrated at being on calls and then the person on the Zoom call, the webinar, like type in chat, type in where you're from. Can I get a yes? They're getting what's called micro commitments. So at the end or at some point during the presentation, when I ask for a sale, you're more likely to do it. There's all kinds of languaging and psychology that is deep manipulation and influence that is, to me, Stephen's story, not used in service of all life. This is really in service of the seller. And so my ask is to recognize that way of doing business is outdated. It's the way that it's leading to human extinction according to indigenous peoples, this extractive way. And also it's the old codes that led to the last reset, which is decadence. I deserve more. I get what I want. And that's a bit deceiving. A lot of people are like, oh, this is in service. But if you really check in, it is still for typically the egoic self wanting to be significant, important. That the path of doing greater good, upon deep reflection, you may realize it's still for the egoic needs. And so there's an opportunity for us to transcend this, to evolve into this incredible new future where everything's purity of expression and play and coming from heart and doing what love would do. So instead of setting boundaries and saying, I don't want this type of person in my life, you can actually operate from a much simpler context that automatically filters the quote unquote right people. So let's unpack this a bit. And so most of us, right, we live in the Western illusion of separation and you're not there yet. And so we create stories based on that global game rule of you're not there yet and you're separate. And therefore within that game rule, we're going to create, if there's something other than me, then I'm going to create a wall that says I don't want that in my field. And so this is the context of setting boundaries and saying, hey, I don't want to, I don't know if you want to label them a mean person or a narcissistic person or blank label person in my field. Right? That's one way to do it. And that way has its own contextual benefits, right? You're experiencing separation. You're experiencing the process of control. You're experiencing, when you keep something out and then you want to keep your energy in, you're becoming discerning of your own separate dualistic energy, right? Very careful with those words. However, there's a whole nother game to play, right? The other game is, by the way, you are collapsing all of reality that corresponds to your consciousness, and there really is no other. Right? This is the non-dual, unified field, energetic way to experience reality. And in a lot of my content, I tell people both are going on. You are particles and waves at the same time. So we do want to experience reality from both perspectives. So I'm just offering, I'm not saying the particle way is bad and the unified field non-dual way is good. I'm just saying there's another game that you get to play. And so what's this other game? Well, you essentially don't even think about, right? Because it's not even the context of that person this way, I want to keep them out. It's how do I vibrate? What is my story, identity that is collapsing reality into these versions of people? And you curate your internal story, identity, and subconscious and conscious mind constructs. And so ultimately, it is a constant game of gnosis and self-awareness. And it's a very different game than trying to keep people out. It's choosing how to vibrate. Don't be tricked by technology and the biohacking space to think that you need some kind of machine or some type of mechanism in order to feel good. You see, that is an illusion because you, according to science and research, your thoughts and emotions affect your epigenetics and your physiology. We also know that your thoughts and emotions that affect your epigenetics affect your DNA, which then affects the renewal aspect of you. What that means is, for example, you have a new knee every 6 months. All of your cells in your body have what's called cellular turnover. And they used to think that it's just our DNA that makes the copy of the next version. But now we know that our consciousness affects our DNA. And so really, your entire physical form corresponds to your mental state. And so that everything about your physical form, not just inflammation, not just chemically, but mechanically, is being directed by your consciousness. Now, if we apply this a little bit more, we also have studies showing that the external world around us, if you look at the double slit experiment, the observer effect, Dr. Larry Farwell's research with plutonium, it shows that our consciousness is collapsing energy into physical reality that corresponds to our consciousness. And so I see in the industry, in the healing industry, the biohacking industry, the wellness industry, they all portray this reality that you need this machine in order to heal or feel better. These machines absolutely have value. I always say our relationship to the act matters more than the act itself. So if you're going to go to some place where you buy technology, I mean, I have a ton of them here behind me. When you experience it, if you notice I said experience it, not use it. When you experience this technology, you get to decide what's the story. Why? Like what's happening? What's the story of this experience? And if you create a story like, oh, this is going to help me do blank, or I'm using this for this outcome, then you are practicing a reality where you need that external thing for this desired outcome. However, you can say, of course, I can choose my health, my physical state, my mindset, my external reality. However, until I sort of master that, I'm going to sit with and experience this technology as sort of training wheels to support me in the path of this sovereign ability to choose reality. And that's a very different context and practice, and therefore reality, than I'm going to use this for that. So I just want to share this insight. And some of these insights that I share, these simple practices, have profound life effects. In this video, I want to talk about the term imposter syndrome. You see, in the entrepreneur space, in the personal development space, there's all this talk about this concept of imposter syndrome. And there's an associated context of fake it until you make it. And I'm here on one of my favorite places on the planet, which is Necker Island. And, with some incredible entrepreneurs that come to Richard Branson's house here. And you would think that many of these very accomplished entrepreneurs would not have imposter syndrome. But yet, many of them do sort of experience that. And I'm always a huge fan of, instead of trying to win the game, you just change the game rules so that you don't even have to play the old game and win it, that the new game rules just makes everything much more incredible. And so if you think about it, imposter syndrome comes from comparison, right? That person is so far ahead and has done so much, and relative to that person, I have not done enough, and therefore that large gap between the other person and you creates this feeling that we label as imposter syndrome. Not there yet. And as you have probably watched some of my content, if you haven't, if this is the first video, I recommend watching some of the other content where I speak about the grand programming illusion falsehood that we've been programmed with all marketing is you're not there yet. And the truth of the matter is there's only here and now, and you've never not been there because there doesn't exist. And so how do you change the game? How do you change the game of reality, which you get to choose, so that imposter syndrome can't happen, which means comparison can't happen. Right? You can imagine a life where there's no comparison between you and others and you. It would be pretty awesome. So what is this reality? Well, I'll share with you, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was given this image, and I've been having these instructions or images or knowing since I was 5, direct instructions from spirit, God, source. And this image was you, myself, and every other person. Our spirit is like in an arcade in the spirit realm. And we're all playing a different game, right? It's almost like I'm playing Pac-Man, you're playing Mario Brothers, someone's playing Asteroid, someone's playing another game, and we're like all in an arcade together, right? And the person playing Pac-Man would never look over at the person playing Mario Brothers and say, oh my God, you're so far ahead, because it's an entirely different game. And so what I realized is that our human experience here on Earth is an entirely different game for each individual. And so from that perspective, there's never any comparison. You really get to connect with another human. Oh my God, how was Mario Brothers? How was that? And the other person will be like, how was Pac-Man? And so I encourage you to use this framework to dissolve comparison and therefore imposter syndrome. So in this video, I'm going to talk about a very important contextual shift that will completely reduce this illusion of not being worthy or self-worth, right? Striving for more. And it simply is a change in language. If you imagine the normal language, the normal context is I'm going to practice so that I become better at whatever you're practicing. And that comes from this need to get somewhere. Like you're not there yet, and practicing will get you there, right? It will increase your skill, your whatever that you're developing and practicing. Now imagine if we switch it to, I'm going to practice in allowing myself to naturally unfold as my higher self slash spirit slash universe slash God intends. I want to practice allowing myself to unfold. And that's a very different context than practicing to be better. And if you start to apply this to your life, I'm going to practice allowing myself to unfold. If you notice that that term and that sentence is a very different game than practicing to be better. And this is the power of the spells in the language, the spells that we're casting out there that dictates reality. And we were never taught to navigate situations by using new spells and using a new reality. We were taught to navigate a situation by identifying a problem and solving it. Right? However, you are infinitely capable, and therefore you don't have to play the game that society has framed for you. You can choose the game any way you want. And how you do that is you recognize what is the current game and how do you language the current situation where it is not the context of the current game. And a common example again is whenever something arises in our life that we don't want, we call it a problem. That's a context. That's not a factual thing. That is a human construct, a problem. And then even solving the problem is yet a human construct. And so just keep in mind in heart and soul that you absolutely can choose what's the context. Right? And so always be looking at choosing the context before dropping into how to navigate within that context. And this choosing context aspect, the reason it is not taught because it allows you to wield and render reality any way you want. And then again, I always say whenever I say that, I want to caveat that with, you want to make sure that you're rendering reality any way you want in service of all life and not just yourself. The manifesting what you deserve energy is what led to the last reset. And so we know what not to do. And so you can learn to manifest and render reality, I call it, but ideally in service for all life. Here's a simple tactical thing you can do to bring abundance into your life. And by the way, I've made many videos on how you can actually exist outside of the abundance scarcity duality. But if you're deciding to play this game of abundance and scarcity, I would say you live abundance. You don't wish for it. You don't manifest it. You incorporate it into your everyday life. So how do you do this? Well, like right now, I'm walking to a gathering and I'm showing up. It's going to be maybe 8 to 10 minutes early because I'm telling the universe there's plenty of time. When I buy things, I always buy extra. And with some of the extra, whatever I need, I'll buy extra. And with the extra ones, I'll give it to friends, or maybe it just sits around because I'm telling the universe there's plenty. And so these are simple daily actions where you are exemplifying living as abundance versus asking for abundance as if it's a separate thing other than you that you get to have. This is a very important context. You can apply this to gratitude, love, joy, bliss, anything that you're calling in. You change the context from getting it and having it to living as it. And there's one simple contextual change in living as that energy becomes the most miraculous way to live as that. Because the context is we have this illusion that we're separate from the universe, but we're one with the universe. So when you live as these things, you automatically call that into your life. So this video is specifically for parents. If you're a parent, I have a very specific tactical thing that you can say to your children that completely changes the paradigm of the relationship between you and them. And this paradigm prevents them from ever feeling shame as a result of your interaction with it. And so I'm a huge fan of we get to design the game rules of reality. We don't have to live by the existing mass media / industrial complex paradigm that's been imprinted onto us. And so what is this new paradigm, new context? Well, all parents, right, want to parent their children. So they will advise them and tell them what to do, maybe even correct them. And maybe even, we all have our moments. I have as well plenty of times where you react, like emotionally, right? You have what I call a divine spark of awareness that the mass media calls a trigger, right? A divine spark of awareness that arises as you observe them. And so the interaction that you want to have with them in the words, in the language is this. What I've said to my daughters is, if I ever react, correct, discipline, or in any way respond in a way that's sort of caustic, perceived as caustic, know that it has nothing to do with you. You're simply exemplifying a behavior that is reminding me of an aspect of myself that I have yet to fully love, right? Because if you really unpack this, let's say your child is being messy, and there's a part of you, right, that is messy, but you fully love that part of you, then you wouldn't actually respond and correct them. You would just be like, oh, they're being messy. If they're being, however they're being, let's say they're being mean, and maybe it was a mean aspect of you that you've pushed away, so you work really hard to be kind, then you will be activated, right? This awareness is going to arise to remind you that our job is to love the full spectrum of reality, to love the mean aspect of us as well as the kind aspect, to love the fearful aspect of ourselves as well as the courageous, to love the less than aspect of us, and fully love the I am enough aspect. And so this single sentence or discussion with your kids completely lets them and gives you the freedom to have your own reactions, responses. You can always apologize afterwards, but in that moment of your reaction, they know that it has nothing to do with them. So they don't think they're wrong or bad, which then leads to guilt and shame. Video from the Salt Lake doing a deep ritual all about truth and interacting with Mother Nature and bugs. In this video, I just wanted to share that we all know we get what we see. However, we get to be reminded that to live from that place in that knowing and the embodiment of you get what you see may take a little bit more practice than we realize. Because oftentimes we get into what I call zombie mode, right? Like routines. Routines suck your energy. It's interesting in the productivity space. They talk about you want routines because you'll be much more efficient. However, routines literally put you in a state of non-presence because it's a routine. And energetically, it works against you. Unless you like diminished energy and not being able to dream and have very little intuition, then it actually works for you. But for those of you that are seeking or wanting or living or wanting to experience and living as God and being able to highly intuitively tune into all the things and wield reality, then routines, kind of work against that. And so one thing I want to say is we really get to fully take in that there's science. This isn't even mystical, religious, spiritual stuff anymore. This is like science with plutonium, science with light particles, science with so many different ways, proving that we do get what we look for, right? Just like when you ask an AI a question, it's going to answer. The thing is, what questions are you asking? That works the same way as reality. And so I encourage all of you to, if you're currently looking for problems to solve, recognize that you'll always get more problems. If you're looking to heal your wounds, you will always have more wounds to heal. If you're looking to awaken, you must find more parts that are asleep to awaken. And there's no right or wrong way to play this game. I'm simply stating how I believe reality works based on my last 36 years of being on this path and last 16 years devotion to the Hermetic principles. And I in my reality, because I believe in it, I've seen it over and over again. As soon as someone switches what they're looking for, their life completely switches, and I'm in the, right now, I'm just having fun with, I literally just see miracles, and miracles happen all the time because I'm looking for it. And so just like acknowledging the miracles of every second, and literally every day is filled with miracles. And so you get to choose the game of life that you want to experience. Just don't let mass media, industrial, medical complex dictate you as to what the game is. And I'm going to make a second part about, the usual game and a game that I like to play. There's part 2 of you get what you see. In part 1, I talked about you really do get what you see. And in this video, I'm going to talk about, what's the mass media game? Like, what is life? Well, the mass media program, life is about becoming something, being productive, and in that becoming something, you can choose your label: entrepreneur, teacher, lawyer, doctor, and you want to do it well. You want to be quote unquote successful. What is success? Well, in mass media, success means you've generated a good amount of income and you now have enough money to do what you want, which is freedom in the definition of the mass media. And then if you enslave yourself in that process for 30 to 40 years, then you will have enough. So you finally feel safe and important and significant to finally enjoy life. But in that moment, mass media, instead of calling it re-enjoy or re-thrive, they call it retire. To tire again. It's like if you're tired getting to retirement, you then enter into retirement to tire some more. This is all language control programming. And so what's the game that you could play? Well, the game that I choose to play, and I told my daughters this, which is, yes, you can play the Western illusion game for sure. And that's going to have its own rewards and gnosis, like, knowing yourself from a spiritual perspective. There's going to be specific lessons of that. And most people realize, like I've met many millionaires and billionaires, they realize that, oh yeah, wait, money and things isn't the thing. That's one of the big ahas. So you could choose to just be like, oh, okay, so that's the truth. Money is literally this fictitious thing man made up, and trying to accrue this fictitious thing is kind of silly sometimes. And so the game I like to play, I told my daughters, look, you can spend 40 years earning millions so you can retire. You can play that game. Or you just spend, a few months, a few years, right? Deeply connecting with 10, 15, 20, 100 people where there's just full trust and they love you. They would die for you. You would die for them. You love them. And you build this tribe. Right? And they don't have to be local. They could be around the world. But you just deeply connect. And when you go to work, whether as an employee or a business, your main goal is to connect to humans. It's not about growing profits. And what ends up happening is, you can imagine, right? Like, let's say you're in your 20s and you've deeply connected with like 10 people that will die for you. Well, don't you think in that moment, let's say you become homeless all of a sudden, well, don't you think one of them would be like, come live with me? If you needed food, don't you think one of them would be like, I have plenty of food for you? If you wanted to travel, don't you think one of them would be like, okay, I'll pay for your expense to go there? Because these people, you've deepened your connection with them to a point where it's literally the relationship that would die for you. So I just want to offer a different game of life for all of you to consider. And you can create any game that you want. So here's part 3 and final part of this, you get what you see. So in the first one, I talked about you literally just get what you see in the science behind that. And number 2, I talked about a different game, right? Seeing the world as a different game. And in this video, I'm going to talk about a practical activity that you can do that really frees you from the programming, right? Because you can imagine, and I've made many videos about this, none of us have had this childhood memory, which is you were sitting around just doing nothing, drooling, looking into space, imagining something. And then your parents came over and said, oh my God, I love you. This is so amazing, right? We only got, I love you, good job, you're so amazing when we physically did something, when we got an A, when we kicked a soccer goal, the first time that we walked, the first time that we smiled. And so we've been conditioned to thinking, right, in this program, inadvertently by our parents, that we need to earn love, that we're not worthy unless we perform. And so one activity you can do, because the word imagination completely downplays what's actually happening, right? When you imagine, you're literally changing timelines, changing your subconscious, changing your neurology, literally changing everything. I highly encourage you to imagine your childhood, right? Many, many moments where you were literally just at 3, at 5, at 10, at 9, at 18, whatever age, through all the ages, where you were literally just sitting there, right? Like watching TV, you were just sitting there daydreaming. You were just sitting there, maybe contemplating about life. And then imagine both parents coming over, and no matter how your parents have treated you and what your relationship to your parents currently are, you do have the sovereign right to imagine a version of them, right? You can look at, every version of them exists. You're just experiencing a version of them in your life that corresponds to your consciousness. And so you do get to go back and recreate these memories where they're loving, right? And maybe you have the worst relationship with them in the now, but you do get to go back and reimagine and rewrite history, if you will. And so just imagine all those moments where you were not doing anything. They came up to you and said, I love you. Oh my God, you're amazing. You're loved as is. This is incredible. What I find is that when we start to implant those frequencies and those codes and those memories, everything downstream changes. We're no longer so blindly, unconsciously controlled by the need to be productive, to produce, to do something. And now we can fully rest and relax in the fullness of who and what we are. And from that relaxed and fullness, not practicing meditation, not doing something to get there, that's yet another mechanism. You simply relax into the fullness of you. And from that place, you just feel, what does your soul, heart want to create? And then that's what you do. And that's a very different energy than creating and making something because you want to be safe, important, and you want to get more stuff.